We saw how we could pivot the data in order to plot it. Let's go back and clean this up a little bit because I'm still using in place in a few places, and let me get rid of that. And I also want to pick a name that has more data for both males and females. So let's do Jesse, and I'm going to read that query, and then let's try this code, and that worked. And then let's try this code, and that worked. So this should all work if you run it from scratch. And here's my plot of female babies named Jesse versus male babies named Jesse. And you can see how it's flipped from being mostly a female name around the 1920s, and then through about 50 through 80, give or take, it was mostly a male name. And then from about 80 on, it's running pretty much neck and neck. So interesting. So we saw how we could pivot the data, but you can also go the other direction. So pivoting will take long form data where the data is stacked in one column and convert it to wide form data where there are multiple columns for each value. And then the opposite of that is melting the data, where you take data with multiple columns and you sort of stack the different columns into one long form column. So let's take a look at how to do that. I'm going to go ahead and add a cell after that. And we still have pivoted. And first thing I note about this pivoted data is if we want to recapture our original data frame here, we're missing some information. So the original data had year, name, gender, and name count. What we have in pivoted is year, and then two values of gender, and then name count inside of those columns, but we don't have name anymore. So we can't recover name from pivoted unless we put the name somewhere in pivoted. So what pivoted is producing is an index that uniquely identifies each row of data, and then two columns for the different values that we want to plot. Name actually is part of the index here, even though there's only one name, so it's not really that useful for identifying which row I'm interested in. Conceptually, it's part of the index anyhow. So the best way to handle name is to set the index here to be both year and name. And then we see index has year and name, and then there's still two columns for female and male. And then now when we have it in pivoted, we can recover it when we do the melt. So before we can do the melt, the other thing we want to do is sort of reset this index so that all of the columns are on the same level. So let's go ahead and do pivot.reset index in place is true. And if I do that, it's actually gonna, I'm not gonna be able to execute this command again. So let me not do that. Let me just reset the index and then store that in to melt. And then to melt has separate columns for year, name, female, and male. The index is labeled gender, but I can ignore that. And now I'm ready to do the melt. So let's go ahead and call the melt method. And before I do that, let's look at the argument. So I'm going to hold down Shift and press Tab so that we can see the signature for the melt method. There's really four different variables that we're going to want to specify, four parameters that we're going to want to specify. So there's ID vars, and that's going to be a list of the columns that are used to identify the row. So that's going to be year and name. And then value vars is a list of the columns that hold the different values basically that I pivoted on. So for this case, value vars is going to be the male column and the female column. And then var name is going to be the name of the column that holds the values, male and female. So male and female in long form is going to be in a gender column. So var name is gender. And then value name is just like values in the pivot. It's the actual data that needed to get graphed. So that's going to be name count. So ID vars is going to be year and name. And then I have value vars is going to be male and female. And then I have var name, which is gender. And then value name is name count. So that's going to take the values in these two columns and put them in a name count column. It's going to take these two columns and sort of aggregate male or female into a gender column. And then year and name are just going to be the same as they are right now. So let's go ahead and execute that. And I'm not going to do anything in place, so it'll just show me the results. But sure enough, I have year, name, gender, which is male and female, and name count. Now, the original data was actually ordered by year. So if we wanted to reorder this, we could also do sort values, year. Actually, let's do year first, and then gender. And then by default, ascending is true. Okay, so now it's 1915, 1916, and all the way through 2014 with female first and male second.